that me? No. That's not. It's always fun to have, as Jim Rayburn said earlier, it's always fun to have a new student come in and get excited about doing the kind of stuff that you like to do. And Jamie started doing a project with me as part of her class 2 years ago, and she's actually continued the same project now, pushing into her second year. And it's really fun to now start to get, well, okay, here's the first year, and we think that means something, but here comes the second year, and maybe it means something different. So we get a slightly different perspective on the second take. So, Jamie.
Thank you, Dr. Conning. My name is Jamie Marcus, and my research is on the frog survey of Clay County, Alabama. And like he said, 2 years of going into the survey. The materials we use are a body of waters, which includes your ponds and creeks and streams and wetlands. We use outdoor thermometers, recording devices, FrogWatch USA observation data sheets, and flashlight for additional observations. Our methods, we use the FrogWatch guidelines to record the data, and here's the URL right there if anyone's interested in looking at that. Observations are done 30 minutes after sundown, and we use a recording device, and we record the frogs for 3 minutes undisrupted. We record the place and the time, wind speed, temperature, precipitation, species calling, and what their call rates are. And we record any additional observations that we see. Currently, we still have 12 species calling at all the sites. First ones are Anorexis americanus, Anorexis valleri, which are toads, Acris crepitans, Hyla chrysosceles, Hyla cinerea, Hyla gradiosa, which are tree frogs, Pseudacris crucifer, Pseudacris ferriarum, Gastrophryne carolinensis, Lithobates caspiana, Lithobates famitans, and Lithobates unicephala. And the ones with the asterisks are actually new species that are recorded in Clay County that I found. We have 8 calling sites, and this first location is a stable, and it's a flatland. It also has a marshland along the whole area. It has the woods. Sorry. Ooh, I lost. You have the woods that go all the way around, and then on this side you have a creek that comes down southeast, and then right here is all the marshland. It stays pretty marshy most of the time. We have 11 out of the 12 species calling there. Our next 2 sites are Odom Pond 1 and Odom Pond 2. Those are my private ponds. And in Pond 1 is a pond that has woods all the way around it, and the area is driving down towards here. And there is 6 species calling there, and there's a lot of brush and tall grasses also there. In Pond 2, we have a woods around here. It has a creek that runs southeast right here, and this area right here is a very marshy wetland, and we have 10 out of the 12 species calling there. Lake David Pond 1 is a call site that has mostly trees and some bushes. So you see trees, but it's mostly cleared out, a little bushland right there. We have 9 species calling out of the 12 there. Lake David Pond 2, we have some trees, and we have some tall kind of bushy areas, and we have 8 species calling from that one. Pond 3, this is an area that has been land cleared mostly. We do have a marshy area right here in front to the west, and then there's some wooded areas into the northeast. And there are 7 species calling from this pond. And Pond 4 is pretty much all wooded area. This area here is all very, very tall grasses and bushes. And we have 6 species calling from there. And our last site is my residence. This is last year, of course, all the snow we had. And we have a wooded area that goes all the way around the property, a creek that runs southeast, and we have 6 species calling from there. The community comparison shows which site has the most, which is the stable. He has 11 out of 12. Odom 2, David, and David 2 run pretty close to the stable, and the last 3 are at 6. Odom 1 is one that, even though it has 6 there, it does have a low intensity and call rate because of the predatory fish that we believe are in the pond now with those nuts. Call intensity and peak breeding season. The peak breeding season is in spring and summer, with the call intensity being the most with clamacans. And then you have Castellana, carolinensis, gradiosus, nera, chrysoscelis, crepitans, and phalarai. And these are mostly taking place in May and June. This is just for the first year. I was unable to do the second year because of the circumstances. And in our fall and winter months, the peak is usually around February with crucifer, ferrier, americanus, and pheniocephala. And we also do look kind of at, well, not kind of, but we do look at their environments to see what kind of environments are most conducive to frog calling. The one we find most would be the stable. It has all these elements except for the predatory fish are below there and no pond. But these elements here make a very good environment for most of the frogs to be able to call and breed there. And then of course, Odom 1 is the one that has the predatory fish and that we see a low calling rate at. We also look at chorus calls and precipitation. And chorus calls is call intensity, with 0 being no calls, 1 being an individual that you can actually hear one at a time call. 2 would be individuals that overlap, but you can still distinguish the individuals. And 3 is called chorus calling, which has so many individuals calling you can't distinguish between the individuals. And here we're looking at to see whether they call just with precipitation or they call in both. And we see that crepitans calls in 10 days of their choral call that we recorded and 6 days on dry. So 10 on precipitation, 6 on dry. Scenario called 6 days on precipitation and 3 days on dry. We have crucifer, they evened out 3 and 3. And then we have carolinensis, I can't say that very well today, I'm sorry. 4 on wet days and 1 on dry days. And then we have ferriarum at 3 and 1. And then we have Hamatans at Hamatans actually call all on dry days. So the average is they mostly call on precipitation days, but they can call on dry days too. This is a call average table, and I'm not counting David 2, even though it's the highest because we just added that pond this year. So over the 2-year period, the stable had an average of 2.23 being the highest, and David 3 went from a 1 to 2.07, so it had the highest increase at 1.54, and the total average was 1.90 of the area. And our results is there's a diversity of sampling areas with 12 species out of 6 genus present. Mating season is year-round, and the highest mating peak is in the spring. Majority of the species prefer calling when precipitation is present, but is not determined of calling altogether. And a suggestion of lower numbers of species and calls in certain areas are due to environmental influences. And the stable is the most active area with the highest environmental diversity. And discussion-wise, we're looking at Odom Pond 1 being an area where we have predatory fish in there, and they have very low culling rates there, even though they have gone up in species. The culling rate is very still low, except for the Apis crepitans, and their rate is usually pretty high, but they are off of the water, and they stay along the creek in the trees, so they have less predation on them. And of course, Davy 3 went up with their numbers and also their intensity of calling. The stable always has the high calling rate and high species numbers, except for Lithobates caspiana, which is the bullfrog. There's not a pond there, so you're not going to, when there's not a pond, you're generally not going to have bullfrogs breeding there generally. So due to lack of pond, but being adjacent and having less predatory fish, you do have a higher amount of species. The other areas, several species are calling in medial environments, and the area thrives, especially in OD2, thrives due to the fact that its diversity is much like the stable, and 65% of the days recorded have participation, likely raising the odds of successful reproduction of species, although most species still continue to call on days about 50%, and probably due to the reason for permanent water sources